Movement is medicine. How does movement help us, and what are the three obstacles that prevent us from making movement a consistent part of our daily life? Hi, this is Nirmala Shekhar, and we are currently exploring our physical needs in a map of self care. Why is movement medicine? Carol Welch has explained this very beautifully. She says, movement is a medicine that creates change in a person's physical, emotional, and mental states. And we all know the correlation between movement and a person's physical state. When we move for 15 to 20 minutes, the blood flows much better, and it is very beneficial to the cardiovascular system. But that's not the only system that benefits. Every system in the body, every organ in the body benefits because of regular movement. Our digestive system functions much better. The lymph works much better at removing waste and toxins out of the body, especially if we have worked up a sweat. And getting rid of waste is always a good thing. We sleep much better. And when we move regularly, we seem to have much more energy, vitality, and stamina to do our day's work. We don't get tired that easily. And when we move, if we are having minor aches and pains in different muscle groups of the body, and we can overcome that inertia of rest, we will find that after 15 to 20 minutes, the muscles get much better blood supply, and those minor aches and pains seem to fade away. I've tried this many times after being convinced of it by my sister, and I have found that this works every time. But it's not just the physical body that benefits. Our emotional state also benefits. When we move regularly, we develop a positive outlook on life. We feel greater confidence and an ability to manage life's ups and downs in a much better manner. That mental resilience to stress and tension is very evident when we start moving regularly, especially at times when we feel overwhelmed or anxious. Just scheduling a 15 to 20 minute session of movement, we will find that that anxiety seems to reduce and that overwhelm also seems to be manageable. When we are going through difficult times, either a very difficult day or a difficult period in life, just focusing on one thing that can be controlled, and that is a 15 to 20 minute movement break, we will suddenly find that life is not so unmanageable, and that maybe I can manage life in these difficult times. That feeling of confidence that things will turn out to be for the better is something that we experience. And I know from personal experience that in difficult times when nothing seems controllable or manageable, and when life seems very daunting, that movement gives us that faint glimmer of hope, and that is a very precious thing to have, especially in that time. What about our intellectual ability? A lot of studies have been done to prove the relation between movement and our brain's capacity. We think that doing Sudoku puzzles and crossword is a good way to exercise the brain. But exercising the body is an equally beneficial way in which we can exercise the brain. When we move, our brain's ability to learn and remember is increased. Our mental decline is arrested, and the brain releases some neurochemicals that not only make us feel good, but also help us to focus much better. In fact, when we feel that there is a problem that is not solvable, Just putting the problem aside, taking a movement break, and coming back, will suddenly find that we are experiencing deja vus and unique solutions that are just suddenly popping up in our mind. And all of this is because the body and the mind work very closely together. In fact, if all schools and colleges had movement breaks scheduled regularly, we will find that the learning environment is not so stressful and that students are able to enjoy that process of learning and coming up with creative solutions to their own assignments. And if every organization, I know some organizations do this, but if every working organization were to give that much importance to movement, then the organization will find that its employees, first of all, the employee retention increases, and secondly, the employees are able to contribute in a much more productive and creative manner. If movement is so beneficial and helps us, why is it that we are so resistant to regular movement? In fact, if someone were to bottle movement in a capsule, I think they would make millions. And yet, we find that something that's available to us freely is something that is very difficult to do consistently. Why is that? Let's look at 3 different obstacles that prevent us from making movement a regular and sustainable practice. Firstly, as adults, most of us are living in the mind rather than in the body. In fact, the only time we are aware of the body is when we want to focus on our appearance, or when the body sends us reminders through hunger, thirst, cravings, aches and pains, or some kind of illness. Rest of the time, we are living in our mind. And that makes movement very difficult because we are not tuned into our body. Think back to your childhood. What kind of movement did you enjoy? Children love to move their body. They delight in moving their body. They love to run, jump, skip, swirl around, climb, play. If they are walking on the pavement, they'll be walking along the borders of the pavement, on a wooden branch, on different textures. They'll be doing difficult yoga postures very effortlessly. And it's always a delight to watch children move their body. If we can bring that attitude of a child into our movement practice right now, then that movement becomes sustainable. What movement excited you as a child? And which of those movements can you bring safely to the current moment? When you bring a movement practice from your childhood to the current moment, we bring not just the movement, but also the joy of that moment to the current time. And that makes it sustainable. For me, I love swinging. And from childhood till now, I think I have sustained that practice through all times, all places. People close to me know that if I find a swing, anytime, any place, I will make a detour to spend some time in that swing. And being on that swing feels very thrilling. It's not just my mind that is excited, but it's my body that delights in that movement. And when we are able to tune in and encourage that delight of the body, then that makes that movement sustainable. The second obstacle that we have to having a consistent movement practice is that we do not have variety. Variety is the spice of life. Look back at what we eat. Do we eat the same food every day? We want variety in the kind of foods that we have. And if we can give our body that variety in the way it can move, then it becomes easier to sustain a practice. So, when we are exploring new forms of movement, what is good is to spend a consistent time, a week, 10 days, a month with that movement until the muscle becomes familiar with that form of new movement. And once that new movement has become part of the muscle memory, then it is available to us for future use. Let's look at the third obstacle that we have when it comes to having a consistent movement practice. Most of us are too ambitious in our goals. We want to achieve something major. It's either that or nothing at all. And a better solution, in my opinion, is to think micro rather than macro. Start small, start where we are. If you're not walking at all, then start with 500 steps a day and do that consistently before changing that 500 to 1000. And if you're doing 1000 consistently, change it to 1500 and keep building up those steps over the course of the day. When we start small, we don't have to stay where we are. Progressive growth over a period of time will give us that movement practice that we need, but built up in very gradual shifts or changes. Any of those apps that allow us to track our steps is a very big motivational tool and a very good use of technology. Each time we watch those small goals being achieved is like a dopamine rush to the brain and motivates us to continue with that over the next few days as well. If we can sneak in additional steps through the day, then that becomes easy as well. So if we are talking on the phone a lot, challenge ourselves to talk on the phone and walk around the room so that we get additional steps. If you're working in an office environment, drink more water. Firstly, that is very good for health. Secondly, it forces us to take more restroom breaks, and that way we can sneak in additional steps. When we are driving, park the car a few blocks away from the final destination so that we get more opportunities to walk to and then from the destination. A few years ago, when I was doing my yoga teacher training, I found it very hard to balance on one foot. And one of my classmates shared her strategy. She started challenging herself to stand on one foot while brushing her teeth in the morning. Initially, she would hold on to the basin with one hand, but over course of time, the strength in her feet improved and she was able to do that very well. So, being able to do this, again, we are sneaking in a micro movement break in a way that we are building strength into the feet and that ability to balance, both of which are also important other than the cardiovascular movement. So when we start thinking micro rather than macro, it's like a switch is turned on and we can find many, many different ways in which we can start adding movement to our day. I would like to leave you with this question. How many different ways can you add micro enjoyable movement breaks into your day? Do share your tips and strategies. This is Nirmala Shekhar signing off. Bye-bye. Namaste. Do subscribe and hit the bell button for more weekly content on self-care. And if you want even more actionable content on self-care, do join me in the Facebook group for weekly lives, discussions, and more tips.